Old business small form factor machines are getting cheaper by the day, but can they be turned into a decent budget gaming PC for under £50? My advice for anyone getting into PC gaming on a budget has always been to buy a cheap OEM pre-built machine and chuck a graphics card in. And today I finally want to put that to the test. But this time we're throwing in a challenge of making it into a small form factor build. So I may as well introduce to you the machine we're going to be working with today. It's a pretty plain Optiplex 390 small form factor, rocking a perfectly respectable i3-2120, no RAM and no hard drive, which was a steal on eBay for just £35. Normally with these cheap gaming PC builds, I use full tower systems, as full height graphics cards are more easily available, but because we've got the challenge of a smaller build, we're limited on what we can do. And obviously, this does limit our upgrade path graphics card wise, which means we'll have to stick to half height. If the budget was slightly larger, I'd straight away say the GT 1030. However, because we've already taken up £35 of our £50 budget, it will have to be a cheaper GPU for now. This was what I was able to pick up. This is the R5 with 1GB of GDDR3 VRAM. It's going to be perfect for some lower settings in some modern games. With an average going rate of £20 on eBay, it certainly falls into the £50 for those of you who are wanting to build this system for yourselves. But I'm extremely grateful to Budget Builds for actually donating this card for the channel for the use in this video. Next up is our storage. Actually, I was surprised at this deal I was able to get. We picked up a 60GB SanDisk SSD for the excellent price of £1.67. This won't be able to hold your extensive Steam library, but for future expansion you can always go to your local CEX and pick up a 500GB hard drive for the low price of £6. 60GB will be enough to get some small games on your computer for now. Now our RAM situation definitely needs to be sorted, and with some tactical bidding you can easily pick up 4GB of DDR3 for well under £5, or even free in my case. But one note I want to make is maybe in the future you should think about getting 8 or 16 gigs, as that's starting to become the default for gaming PCs nowadays. Now we've run through all the components, we now get to put this all together, and pray that we've got a somewhat plausible gaming experience for the £50 budget we set out with. So, let's get straight into the benchmarks and see how well this concept of small form factor gaming holds up. Starting off with BeamNG Drive, where we ran at the 720p low settings and pulled off an average of 44 FPS. Overall the game did run okay, although we did have to turn down the settings to get a playable experience. It actually did simulate all the crashes pretty well for a dual core processor, so it's done pretty well on that front. Next up we have CSGO running at 800x600 lowest settings, where we pulled off an average of 64 FPS, with 1% lows of 32 and 0.1% lows of 6 FPS. And overall the game did run okay, but for some reason on the day of benchmarking we weren't able to actually play online games because we kept getting placed into US servers, but that's not a system problem, and overall the game ran perfectly fine on here. Next up we have the CS Source benchmark running at 1080p high settings and pulling off an average of 119 FPS, with 1% lows of 51 and 0.1% lows of 38. And overall for the combo we're running, the game didn't do too bad overall. Next up we have GTA 5, and well, normally when benchmarking my performance ratings are based off the average FPS, but in this case I just couldn't do it. Running at 1024x768 low settings, we pulled off an average of 44 FPS, but the game was a stuttery mess, as shown in our percent low averages, and the game couldn't be played comfortably, even at these low settings. And the thing actually really holding us back in this case was the i3-2120. With a few more cores, I think GTA 5 would have run a whole lot better, but as you can see in the top left, the CPU was constantly pegged to 100% usage, which just isn't good to get a good experience. Next up, Euro Truck Simulator 2 running at 1080p low settings, where we pulled off an average of 48 FPS with 1% lows of 28 and 0.1% lows of 6. Overall, the game ran perfect on this system, and to be honest, you don't need the highest end computer to run Euro Truck, so overall, it ran great. Next up is Left 4 Dead 2, where we ran at 720p high settings and pulled off an average of 54 FPS with 1% lows down to 29 and 0.1% lows of 5. And overall, this game ran perfect on the system, and that's not a surprise. Left 4 Dead 2 and in general Source games do run well on some older hardware, so overall it ran great. Now we have the Tomb Raider benchmark running at 720p high settings, where we pulled off a pretty impressive average of 30 FPS with 1% lows of 24 and 0.1% lows of 21, and overall this actually ran really well for the specs we're running, although our GPU was definitely not happy, pegged at 100% all of the time. Next up we have Minecraft running at 720p fast settings with a render distance of 6 chunks, where we pulled off an average FPS of 78 with 1% lows of 9 and 0.1% lows of 2. This was because we were in creative and free roaming about the place, but when we switched over to survival, we ended up getting a much more improved 214 FPS on average with 1% lows of 54 and 0.1% lows of 80. So to conclude, did I succeed in my goal to build a small form factor system on the cheap that could smash through some modern titles? Well, quite honestly, the potential of the components is there, but we had one main factor holding us back from those 60 plus FPS results, and that was the i3-2120. In reality, with the Sandy Bridge platform turning 8 years old, it wasn't a surprise to me that these two heavily aged cores did not perform very well. Something like an i5-2400 would be much better suited to a system like this, and they're currently the best price to performance components you can get on the used market. But all in all, I did enjoy building this system. And once again, I'm thankful to Budget Builds Official for helping me out with this one. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.